He's a degenerate gambler.
You are a smelly pirate hooker.
And he's cheaper than oxygen.
He's useless.
But somehow, they make it work. Jeremy Greene, Tank Spencer. There's no holding back in the Sportsocracy, presented by Ingles Supermarkets.
And this is the Sportsocracy live in the Ingles studio on ESPN Asheville, 92.9 FM, 880 AM, and 1400. The Sportsocracy heard everywhere you go with the iHeartRadio app, and you can also see us everywhere you go on your smart device on YouTube. Go to sportsocracy.com. Click the live video link on the page if you can't seem to find it. It's very searchable, though, on YouTube.
We're the only Sportsocracy on the planet. So I made sure of that.
Indeed. Just click on that live video link, subscribe to the channel so you can join us in the chat and get your thoughts in on whatever the topic of the moment is. And now it's time to continue our series of Mount Rushmores. We have gone through a few divisions already, and today, AFC North time. And it's really hard to come up with just one Mount Rushmore for the first team we're going to talk about here, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I have a funny feeling we're going to fight about this.
I don't know that there's a lot of fighting going to happen because here's the thing. The Pittsburgh Steelers are such a historic franchise that you could come up with a number of different combinations that I think you could get the majority of Steelers fans on board with.
I agree.
The question to me becomes how much focus do you put on the coaches as opposed to the players?
And the ownership.
Because
I feel like Dan Rooney should be number one. And you could make the argument it should be his son. I'm not even sure which of the two family members. I don't even know which one to put on this thing.
Do you put Art up there?
As I went down the rabbit hole, I think it has to be Art Rooney.
Okay.
I mean, yes, Art's done a lot to further the sport. And for me, I think he has to be the one. But that also, they've got so many great players, that takes me off Chuck Noll.
Yep.
I can't it's one or the other. You can either have Noll as the coach that put them on the right track. I mean, and then that means you have to leave off Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin.
Exactly. That should be a Mount Rushmore to itself. You should have Art Rooney and then Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. That's done. Front office Mount Rushmore.
That's the front office. And we're done.
But then
you got to get to the players.
And see, that's the thing. Like,
did you have Art Rooney in yours to begin with?
I did not. I went all players.
I think you have to.
Because I didn't think it was fair. I didn't think it was fair to isolate any of the coaches. And the ownership.
But, I mean, if you were going to, it would be Noll. It has to be.
I would think so.
He was the coach.
Guy won 4 Super Bowls.
He did, and he was there for 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and it feels bad leaving off Bill Cowher. He was there 15.
Right.
Mike Tomlin's been there 16.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you got to love a franchise that's this consistent.
Absolutely.
So, for me, I put that on the ownership. And I think the one that did more for the sport was Art. So that's where I started. Who was your one?
My one? Mean Joe Greene.
Mean Joe Greene was my 2. So that's one that I feel like we can universally say he has to be in it.
Absolutely.
And then?
It was Ben.
And I knew you were going to say that. You would have Ben over Bradshaw.
Yes.
I don't know that I agree with you.
I feel like he was the better of the quarterbacks. Yes,
he wasn't the more successful of the quarterbacks.
Yes, Bradshaw has more rings. But again, how much was that due to that steel curtain defense and the outstanding play of others? It was, I mean, yeah, Terry was doing special stuff in the 1970s, and it's all well and good, but he got passed. He got passed by Ben Roethlisberger to me.
And I just can't get there. Because one has the rings and one has a ring.
2.
Well,
Ben's got 2.
Yeah, he's got. He does.
He does.
He does. I always forget about the Seattle Super Bowl. That was, without a doubt, the most nondescript Super Bowl we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, you convinced me. I didn't want you to, but you're right.
But Ben belongs.
I mean, nobody wants to say this, but, and this is I'm going to irk two fan bases at one time. The similarities between Joe Namath and Terry Bradshaw are really staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Both were stalwart players in a franchise. Then you go down the old statistical stats don't care about your feelings path, and you go, ooh, well, that doesn't look as good as I wanted it to. The difference in rings is just not as much as I want it to be. And you're right, it was a lot because of the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I will agree on Ben.
Okay.
This is where it gets, I believe, virtually impossible. My list is 17 deep.
I didn't go quite that deep, but I do have more. I do, because I have 2 Mount Rushmores just for the players. My first iteration of this, my 3, was Jack Lambert. Because, just follow me down the path here. Are there other Steelers that are more deserving statistics-wise? Sure. But when you're talking about a Mount Rushmore, what's going to draw the people? And I think it's going to be Jack Lambert's scary-ass toothless mug up there. I mean, he personifies Pittsburgh Steeler football.
He does, but do you not think of Mean Joe Greene first?
Yeah, that's why he's won.
And I get that. They've been so good for so long that I almost can't give them another one. That's how you got me off Terry Bradshaw. You're right. When I think of that team, I think of the defense. The face of that was Mean Joe Greene.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't have another one.
Okay.
Because the one after much gnashing of teeth that I got to was Troy Polamalu.
Yep. He was my 4. Again, for the aesthetic, because I'm going to have the hair.
Oh, the hair was phenomenal.
The hair is going to be the whole back splash of the mountain.
Oh, no doubt. Oh, yeah. And then you look at who that means you're leaving off.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even consider Franco Harris.
Really?
For a second. I didn't think about him for a second. I saw the name and I went, no shot.
But why?
There's no shot I get him on this list.
But why? Were the stats just not good enough for you?
He was a phenomenal player.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, he was basically a fullback. And I understand he did a lot of stuff.
He was a multi-time All-Pro.
I get it.
Was like Mr. Steeler in the community. Had that recognizable face that everybody loved. And, oh, by the way, he's responsible for the most famous play in NFL history.
Which still probably didn't happen. It's just we didn't have cameras back then, so we don't actually know. But, I mean, I saw the name, and I just went, there's no way. Because for me, I can't put Franco in and leave Terry Bradshaw off. I can't. It's just not physically. And maybe I'm biased because I'm younger, and I've grown up in an age where fullbacks are like Mike Allstott. And I know he played right. I get it. He was a glorified fullback. That's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't get there.
That's why Franco Harris stars on my Mount Rushmore 3 for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I mean, then you go Mike Webster, who's arguably one of the best to ever play his position ever.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Ham, Rod Woodson.
Mm-hmm. He was also on Mount Rushmore 3. My Mount Rushmore 3 was Terry Bradshaw 1.
Wow, he got all the way to 9? For him to be on the third one, he had to get to 9.
I mean, there was the front office one.
Oh, okay.
So he's on the second player Mount Rushmore.
Okay.
Terry Bradshaw 1, Franco Harris 2, Rod Woodson 3, and then number 4. I don't feel like you could have an auxiliary Mount Rushmore for the Pittsburgh Steelers without having the most beautiful and vicious smile in the NFL history. It's Hines Ward.
Hines Ward was one I considered for a long time. Lynn Swann is one I considered for a long time.
Yep. Stallworth would have been that's Mount Rushmore 4. That's what I'm saying. It's so hard to pare this down to just 4.
To me, that's why this topic is so interesting, because you get into so many facets of what this actually means. Because as I built mine, I could not do this without having somebody associated with the front office. And I went Rooney Knoll against each other for – it probably took me longer to settle that in my own head than anything else did.
Mm-hmm.
Mean Joe was the no-doubter. Then I got stuck at quarterback, and I felt like you couldn't put two of them in there. And I basically just wanted to see which one you were going to try to convince me of, and I was going to go, yeah, what he said. Because if anybody got angry, I could go, he was the one that did it.
So, I mean, you can go on. You can continue down the honorable mentions path with the Pittsburgh Steelers until the cows come home.
Eat and Sleep Football, who is a Steelers fan, said, in the words of Bill Buttigieg, Tank, I hate the things you say, when you say them, and how you say them. We need to get that on a shirt. Just get Tank's face up here. I hate the things you say, the way you say them.
And how you say them.
And how you say them.
Indeed.
I know it's a little bit controversial, but did you guys debate on Antonio Brown being on that?
Nope.
No.
Didn't even consider it. Didn't last long enough. I could argue he wouldn't even belong on the Mount Rushmore of receivers for this team. And see, I don't fixate that much on when it happened. Look, I think Antonio Brown's a great player, but there's no shot I'm putting him on this over Lynn Swann.
Mm-hmm.
None.
No.
I couldn't put him on it over Franco Harris. I'll be really honest. I couldn't put him on it over Hines Ward.
No.
So that was a name that I looked at. It's written there, Heath Miller. That's another one that I looked at the name, went, yeah, you deserve to be at least mentioned here, but you're not anywhere close to this.
No.
And looking at the chat, you see a lot of Swan. You see a lot of Hines Ward.
Lynn Swann's the one I think is the hardest for me to live off. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you mean by hardest. What do you mean? Oh, the hardest to leave off?
Yes. I mean, he was a special player.
He was.
At a time that you didn't have a ton of guys that were special players at that position.
Mm-hmm.
I saw somebody say he changed the way we play wide receiver. I agree with that to a point, but not – it wasn't just him by himself. There were a lot of guys in that range of years that I could attribute that to.
Right.
It was more a combination of all of them than one. But he is one of the first names I think about when I start thinking about, this is when things moved.
The one that I tried to squeeze in there was James Harrison. I feel like he has a place.
I wrote that name down, and I couldn't get it in over Rod Woodson.
Mm-mm.
I certainly couldn't get it over Jack Ham and a slew of others. So I feel like we have to narrow this down to 4.
Yes.
Can we agree on Rooney?
Sure.
You got to have somebody.
I would agree.
We can agree on Rooney. We can agree on Mean Joe Greene.
Yes.
We can agree on Ben.
Yes.
And then is Polamalu 4?
Troy Polamalu 4.
I think that's it. And then you look at the list you left off and went, we have
that wrong.
We have to do one of these for the Houston Texans. Can we not steal 3 spots from Houston?
Just so we can have everybody.
Since we're building these, just we'll trade Houston, one of our greats. You can claim, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Antonio Brown. You can have Antonio Brown, who would be your 2, and he's our 22. We need 3 spots on your mountain because we don't have enough space.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, there you have it. The Mount Rushmore for the Pittsburgh Steelers is the hardest one to do. Or is it?
For right now.
Because when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. If you think about despite the fact that you have such a short amount of time, there are so many names that you could put on that Mount Rushmore.
Oh, and we're going to fight because there's one that, to me, has to be on it, and you're going to tell me I'm out of my mind.
You're in the Sportsocracy, and this is ESPN Asheville.